For most people, inflation feels simple. Prices go up, life gets more expensive, and money slowly seems to lose its value. But inflation is not just an economic accident. It is the visible surface of a much deeper system. A system built to survive debt, crisis, and political pressure. And at the center of that system stand the central banks. To understand what's happening today, we need to move past supermarket prices and daily headlines. We need to look at how money itself is created. Because modern inflation is not driven only by demand or supply. It is driven by design. For most of human history, money was limited. Gold had to be mined, silver had to be extracted. Wealth grew slowly, constrained by physical reality. But the modern financial system changed that completely. Today, money is not found, it is issued. Central banks create money digitally through balance sheets and policy decisions. And this power reshaped the global economy. When governments spend more than they collect, they borrow. They issue bonds, accumulate obligations, and roll their debts forward. But debt alone is not enough to keep a system running. It must remain affordable. And this is where money creation enters quietly. When central banks buy government bonds, they do not use stored savings. They create new money, injecting liquidity into the system, suppressing interest rates, stabilizing markets, and making expanding debt survivable. For decades, this process grew steadily. But after the 2008 financial crisis, central banks crossed a historic line. They began creating money at scale. Quantitative easing became normal. Trillions were issued. Rates collapsed. And markets learned something dangerous. Whenever stress appeared, money would follow. Pandemics, bank failures, geopolitical shocks. Each time, balance sheets expanded. Each time, intervention became faster. And each time, the global system moved further into a structure that depends on monetary expansion to function. At first, the effects seemed distant. Asset prices rose, stock markets surged, real estate boomed. But inflation does not stay in financial markets forever. Eventually, it migrates into the real economy, into wages, energy, food, and housing. And once inflation enters daily life, it reshapes behavior, expectations, and political pressure. Because inflation is not only an economic force, it is a social one. As inflation rises, central banks are forced to respond. They raise interest rates, restrict liquidity, and attempt to cool demand. But higher rates expose the fragility underneath. Governments face heavier debt costs. Corporations struggle to refinance. Consumers pull back. And so the system enters a narrow corridor. Print too much and currencies weaken. Tighten too hard and debt breaks. This is the structural conflict inside modern monetary policy. Central banks are no longer simply fighting inflation. They are managing stability itself, trying to preserve purchasing power without collapsing structures built on decades of cheap money. This is why inflation has become so difficult to control. It is no longer a temporary spike. It is a structural symptom, a signal that the system is carrying more debt than organic growth can support. And because of that, money creation has quietly changed its role. It is no longer an emergency response. It is infrastructure. It finances governments, underpins asset markets, smooths political cycles, and absorbs economic shocks. But every unit created redistributes value, from savers to debtors, from fixed incomes to assets, from those who hold cash to those closest to the flow of money. Inflation is not neutral. It produces winners and losers. And most people experience it from the losing side. Lower purchasing power, higher living costs, eroded savings, all while the system presents inflation as temporary, necessary, and under control. But history suggests something else. Long periods of monetary expansion rarely end quietly. They tend to conclude with structural change, currency resets, debt restructurings, New monetary standards? The question is not whether money will continue to be created. The question is how long confidence can absorb it. Because inflation is ultimately psychological. It exists not only in data, but in belief. Belief that money will hold value, that debt will be honored, that institutions remain credible. And once that belief begins to fracture, the dynamics move faster than any central bank can respond. What we are witnessing today is not simply a policy phase. It is the financial system testing its own limits. Modern money is no longer just a medium of exchange. It has become the primary mechanism used to hold a global debt structure together. How long that can continue is uncertain, but the consequences of its failure would extend far beyond prices. They would redefine trust, power, and the future of finance itself. And that leads to a deeper question. If the system depends on endless monetary expansion to survive, what happens when expansion is no longer enough? That question is rarely discussed, but it is quietly shaping everything.